The Grand Regent Hotel wasn't just a building, it was a symbol. From the crystal chandeliers that sparkled like constellations to the hand-woven carpets that softened every footstep, everything about the place screamed opulence. It was the crown jewel of Marcus Bennett's empire, an empire Kendra Thompson had every right to enjoy. Tonight, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. Guests in designer suits sipped champagne at the bar, while elegantly dressed patrons checked in, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of piano music drifting from a corner. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and leather, a concoction designed to evoke wealth and exclusivity. Kendra stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a precision that turned heads. The rhythmic sound echoed, announcing her presence. Heads turned as if on cue, drawn by her commanding aura. Her tailored white suit fit her like a second skin, exuding elegance and power. The way she carried herself, shoulders back, head high, left no doubt that she belonged, or at least, that she should have. She approached the front desk, where two receptionists were engaged in conversation. Their laughter ceased abruptly when she arrived, their expressions snapping into professional masks. Yet beneath the surface, something lingered, an almost imperceptible shift in their demeanor. "Good evening," Kendra said, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. "I have a reservation for the presidential suite under Thompson." The younger receptionist hesitated, her smile faltering as her eyes flicked over Kendra. The pause was brief but noticeable, a slight narrowing of her gaze that Kendra didn't miss. The receptionist began typing on the computer, her brow furrowing as if the task required exceptional effort. After a moment, she looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am, there's no record of your reservation." Kendra's chest tightened, but she maintained her composure. Years of navigating corporate boardrooms had taught her the art of restraint. "That's impossible. I confirmed this yesterday." She slid her phone across the counter, the screen displaying the reservation confirmation in crisp black and white. The receptionist glanced at the phone, but didn't pick it up. Instead, she turned slightly, whispering something to her colleague. Their eyes met, and a flicker of something passed between them, something that felt uncomfortably familiar to Kendra, a mixture of doubt and quiet dismissal. "Unfortunately," the receptionist said, straightening, "we're fully booked tonight. There's nothing we can do?" Kendra's jaw tightened, a subtle sign of her growing frustration. "Fully booked?" She gestured toward the rows of pristine keycards neatly arranged on the wall behind them. "It doesn't look like you're at capacity." "I assure you, ma'am," the receptionist said, her tone clipped and practiced, "that's the case." Nearby, a middle-aged couple arrived. They were greeted with wide smiles and deferential tones, their check-in completed within moments. The pair laughed as they walked toward the elevators, keycards in hand. The juxtaposition stung. Kendra's irritation deepened, but she kept her voice steady. "I'd like to speak with a manager," she said, her words measured yet firm. A few minutes later, Edward Reese appeared. The general manager exuded a polished professionalism, his tailored suit and sleek haircut perfectly in line with the Grand Regent's image. Yet his eyes betrayed a hint of calculation, as though he had already decided the outcome of this interaction. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, his tone smooth but devoid of warmth. Kendra explained her situation, her voice unwavering. As she spoke, Edward nodded occasionally, his expression fixed in a neutral mask that revealed nothing. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said finally, his tone teetering on condescension. "Our system shows no reservation under your name." Kendra felt the sting of familiarity. This wasn't the first time her presence had been questioned, her legitimacy doubted. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said, her tone sharpening. "It's discrimination." The word landed like a thunderclap. Conversations in the lobby hushed as nearby guests turned to watch. Edward's smile vanished, replaced by a stony expression. "I assure you, that's not the case," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "If you'd like, we can recommend other accommodations." Kendra didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, her stance unyielding. "I'll wait right here," she said, her voice steady as granite. "And I suggest you double-check that reservation." Across town, in the penthouse suite of another luxurious property, Marcus Bennett was nearing the end of a high-stakes strategy session with his executive team. The vast expanse of the room perfectly mirrored his own imposing presence, sleek, modern, and meticulously organized. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic, breathtaking view of the sprawling city skyline. A long, polished mahogany table stretched across the room, its surface littered with documents, open laptops, and scattered notes. The billionaire mogul exuded an aura of effortless power, every movement he made precise, every word he uttered measured and deliberate. Those around him, his trusted executives, hung on his every sentence, nodding in perfect unison, furiously scribbling down notes, eager to capture and internalize his every insight. As the meeting neared its conclusion, Marcus leaned back in his ergonomic chair, casting a sharp, calculated gaze over the room. His presence, unwavering and dominant, filled the space, and it was clear that every decision made here bore his unmistakable influence. The moment of dismissal was imminent, but just as he was about to signal the end of the meeting, his phone buzzed loudly on the table, its screen lighting up with Kendra's name. He glanced at it for a split second, his expression hardening before he rose from his seat with a purposeful motion, excusing himself without hesitation. "Hey, love," he answered, his voice softening instantly, a gentleness that only Kendra could coax from him. But as her voice came through the line, his relaxed demeanor quickly darkened. Each word she spoke cut through the calm like a blade, transforming the stoic precision of a businessman into the cold, simmering fury of a man who would not stand for any slight against the woman he loved and protected above all. "They're denying my reservation," she said, her voice calm but tinged with frustration. "They're telling me it doesn't exist." Marcus's brow furrowed in a deep crease, his free hand clenching into a tight fist at his side, his jaw locking with tension. "Who's they?" he asked, his voice steady, though the warning edge was unmistakable. "The staff at your hotel," Kendra replied, her tone clipped, the underlying irritation barely concealed. "Your flagship property, no less." For a long, unbearable moment, Marcus remained silent. His jaw tightened even further, the muscles in his face working as he processed her words, each syllable fueling a rising tide of anger. The Grand Regent was no ordinary hotel. It was his pride, his legacy, and a brand that embodied excellence, sophistication, and uncompromising service. To hear that Kendra, the woman he cherished and respected above all, had been treated with anything less than the utmost courtesy and care was an affront that enraged him to his core. "Stay where you are," he finally commanded, his voice low but unmistakably firm, each word laced with quiet fury. "I'll be there shortly." He ended the call with a decisive click, turning to his assistant with a cold, swift motion. "Cancel my evening schedule," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I need a car, and I need it immediately." His assistant, who had long grown accustomed to Marcus's abrupt and urgent requests, nodded without hesitation and reached for her phone. Marcus, with the same practiced precision, grabbed his tailored jacket, slipping it on effortlessly as he strode toward the door, his mind racing with a singular focus. The staff at the Grand Regent were among the best. He had personally ensured their training was flawless, their standards impeccable. This failure was not just inexcusable, it was deeply personal. But what incensed him even more than their incompetence was the image of Kendra standing there, her dignity questioned in a place that bore his name, a place he had built with his own hands and vision. That was something he would not tolerate. It was unacceptable, and someone was going to answer for it. The Grand Regent's lobby bustled with understated elegance. Beneath the golden glow of crystal chandeliers, guests exchanged quiet conversations, their voices blending with the soft notes of a live pianist in the corner. Bellhops in tailored uniforms maneuvered luggage carts with precision, while a steady stream of arrivals and departures filled the air with a rhythm as seamless as the luxury the hotel promised. But that rhythm faltered when Marcus Bennett walked through the glass doors. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the ambient light, Marcus exuded authority with every step. His polished leather shoes barely made a sound against the marble floor, yet his presence was loud enough to silence the hum of activity. Heads turned, whispers rippled through the lobby, and the staff straightened instinctively, as if they could feel the weight of his gaze before it landed. His dark eyes scanned the room with the precision of a hawk, searching for the one person who could command his attention above all else. When he spotted Kendra standing near the front desk, her arms crossed and her posture resolute, his expression softened for a fleeting moment. He crossed the lobby with purposeful strides, weaving through the crowd like a force of nature. Kendra turned as he approached, her composed exterior cracking just enough to let relief flicker in her eyes. Marcus leaned in, pressing a kiss to her cheek, his gesture intimate yet restrained. It was the only moment of warmth before his attention shifted, and his gaze locked onto Edward Reese, the general manager. "What's the issue here?" Marcus's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, a blade sheathed but ready to cut. Edward, who had been attempting to maintain an air of control, visibly faltered under Marcus's scrutiny. His carefully rehearsed demeanor slipped, and he took a small step back, almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Bennett," Edward began, his voice tinged with nervousness. "I wasn't aware you—" "Save it," Marcus interrupted, his tone as sharp as the crease in his suit pants. "Explain why my wife was denied her reservation." Edward's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "There appears to have been a mix-up with the system," he stammered, his words tumbling out in a rush. "A mix-up," Marcus repeated, his voice low and dangerously steady. "That's your excuse for disrespecting my wife in my hotel?" Edward's face turned a shade paler. "Sir, I assure you—" "Assure me of nothing," Marcus snapped, his words cutting through the air like a whip. "Gather your staff, now." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. Edward hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded jerkily before scurrying off to comply. Marcus turned back to Kendra, his expression softening as he reached for her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice a stark contrast to the steel he had shown moments before. Kendra nodded, though her jaw was still tight. "I'm fine," she said, her tone steady. "But this isn't just about me, Marcus. You know that." He nodded, his eyes darkening with understanding. "I know," he said simply, "and we'll address it." Within minutes, the front desk staff had assembled, their nervous energy palpable as they avoided Marcus's gaze. Edward stood among them, visibly sweating despite the cool, climate-controlled air. Marcus took a slow step forward, letting the weight of his presence settle over the group like a storm cloud. "Every single person in this room," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "represents the Grand Regent name, my name. And today you've not only failed my wife, you've failed the very principles this hotel was built on." His gaze swept across the group, each word landing with the force of a hammer. "This establishment prides itself on excellence, on respect, and on treating every guest like royalty. Yet somehow you thought it was acceptable to deny my wife the dignity and service she deserves. Explain that to me." Silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. No one dared to speak. Finally, Edward cleared his throat, his voice trembling as he began. "It was a misunderstanding, sir. An error in communication." "Enough," Marcus said, cutting him off with a single word. His eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a near growl. "Errors in communication don't cause staff to whisper and exchange looks. Errors in communication don't make guests feel unwelcome. What I see here isn't a misunderstanding. It's incompetence. And worse, it's bias." The word hit like a thunderclap, leaving no room for denial. The staff shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another but avoiding Marcus's gaze. "You will address this," Marcus continued, his tone brooking no argument, "and you will do so immediately. Failure to uphold the standards of this hotel is failure to uphold the standards of this brand, my brand. Do I make myself clear?" A chorus of murmured "Yes, sir" followed, the staff nodding in unison. Marcus stepped back, his expression as hard as granite. "Now, fix this," he said, turning to Edward with a final, icy glare, "and fix it properly." With that, Marcus turned to Kendra, offering her his arm. "Let's get you to your suite," he said, his voice softening once more. As they walked toward the elevator, the lobby remained silent, the weight of Marcus's words lingering long after he and Kendra disappeared from view. Within minutes, The entire front-of-house team gathered in the Grand Regent's opulent lobby. Their uniforms, usually a symbol of professionalism, now seemed to weigh heavy on their shoulders. Faces reflected a mix of confusion, unease, and fear. The air was charged with tension, a stark contrast to the tranquil luxury the hotel was known for. Guests loitered nearby, pretending not to watch but unable to tear their eyes away from the drama unfolding in front of them. Phones were subtly raised, cameras capturing every word and expression. Marcus Bennett stood at the center of it all, the undeniable axis of the room's energy. His imposing frame and impeccably tailored suit made him look every bit the master of his empire. His presence radiated authority, the kind that commanded attention without the need for raised voices or dramatics. His silence, for a moment, was more powerful than any speech, his dark eyes scanning the assembled staff with a piercing intensity. "This hotel," Marcus began, his voice smooth but with a razor-sharp edge that sliced through the silence, "was built on principles of excellence, respect, and inclusivity." His words rang out, each syllable measured and deliberate. Tonight, those principles were not just neglected, they were violated. A murmur rippled through the staff, though none dared to speak. The weight of his words pressed down on them, palpable and unrelenting. Marcus's gaze swept across the group, landing squarely on Edward Reese. "As general manager, it is your duty to ensure that every guest who walks through those doors is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve," Marcus said, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of unmistakable fury. "You have failed." Edward's face turned ashen. His mouth opened slightly, a weak protest forming, but Marcus raised a hand, silencing him with an effortless gesture that conveyed more authority than any shout could. "Effective immediately," Marcus continued, his tone cold as steel. "You are relieved of your duties." Gasps erupted from both staff and guests. The murmurs grew louder, the ripple of shock spreading through the room like a wave. Edward's face twisted in disbelief, his lips parting as if to argue, but the words died before they could escape. He glanced at Marcus, then at the staff, his gaze pleading, but no one moved to defend him. The sound of footsteps broke the tension as two uniformed security guards stepped forward, their expressions impassive. Without hesitation, they escorted Edward away, his protest now reduced to an inaudible mumble drowned out by the murmuring crowd. As the doors closed behind Edward, Marcus turned back to the remaining staff. His expression was unreadable, but his presence filled the room with an almost tangible weight. He paused, letting the moment sink in before speaking again. "Let this serve as a lesson," he said, his voice calm but resonating with conviction. "Discrimination, in any form, has no place in my hotels. Not in this one, not in any of them." His eyes bore into the staff, challenging each one of them to meet his gaze. Few could. "This is not just about tonight," Marcus continued, his voice rising slightly, a quiet fire burning beneath his measured words. "This is about the culture we create, the values we stand for, the experience every guest deserves. If you cannot uphold those values, you do not belong here. Change begins now." The staff stood frozen, absorbing the full weight of his declaration. Some exchanged nervous glances, others nodded slightly, acknowledging the gravity of the moment. A few appeared humbled, their postures stiffening as if silently vowing to rise to the challenge. Marcus took a step back, his gaze shifting toward Kendra, who stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with quiet resolve. For a moment his expression softened, and he gave her a small nod, an unspoken assurance that the changes he demanded were not just for her, but for every guest who might otherwise face what she had. Turning to the crowd of onlookers, many of whom were guests, Marcus addressed them directly. "The Grand Regent stands for more than luxury," he said. "It stands for respect, for dignity, and for a promise that every person who stays here feels valued. Tonight, that promise was broken. It will not happen again." The guests, initially hesitant, began to applaud. The sound grew, echoing through the grand lobby as Marcus nodded once more and gestured for Kendra to join him. Together, they walked toward the elevator, leaving behind a room that buzzed with the aftershocks of his words. As the elevator doors closed, the staff remained rooted in place, the applause fading into a silence filled with reflection and an undeniable sense of change. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept over the city, the story had erupted across every corner of social media. Videos of Marcus's powerful speech dominated timelines, shared by influencers, journalists, and everyday people alike. The footage, raw and unfiltered, showed him standing resolute in the Grand Regent's lobby, dismantling systemic discrimination with sharp words and unflinching resolve. Every click, every share added fuel to the growing fire of public discourse. The hashtags, Justice for Kendra and Jar Bennett, takes a stand quickly climbed to the top of trending lists, their reach spanning continents. Comment sections overflowed with passionate reactions, outrage at the injustice Kendra had faced, admiration for Marcus's unwavering stance, and countless stories from others who had experienced similar moments of indignity. Each post became part of a larger movement, amplifying voices that had long been ignored. News outlets picked up the story with lightning speed, broadcasting clips of Marcus's confrontation with the staff and his subsequent call to action. Headlines like, "Billionaire stands against discrimination in his own hotel," and "A moment of reckoning at the Grand Regent" flashed across TV screens and online platforms. Talk shows dissected the incident, praising Marcus for taking a public stand and calling for broader accountability within the hospitality industry. Advocacy groups joined the conversation, using the momentum to spotlight ongoing disparities in service and treatment. In the days that followed, Marcus and Kendra turned the uproar into an opportunity for meaningful change. Together, they announced an ambitious initiative to combat discrimination within the hospitality industry. At a press conference streamed live to millions, Marcus stood alongside Kendra as they unveiled a multi-pronged plan. "Change doesn't happen in silence," Marcus declared, his voice steady and firm. "It happens when we confront uncomfortable truths and commit to doing better, not just in words, but in actions." The initiative included mandatory training programs for all hospitality employees designed to address implicit bias and foster inclusivity. It also promised increased oversight, ensuring that incidents like the one Kendra faced would be swiftly and transparently addressed. Partnerships with advocacy groups were formed, bringing experts into the fold to guide the industry toward lasting reform. Kendra, standing beside him, added her voice to the movement. "This isn't just about one hotel or one moment," she said, her words resonating with quiet power. "This is about creating a world where everyone feels seen, respected, and valued, regardless of who they are or where they come from." The initiative sparked a wave of similar commitments from other luxury brands, each striving to match the Bennett's proactive stance. Conferences and panels were organized, bringing together industry leaders, activists, and policymakers to discuss tangible steps toward equity. What had begun as an isolated incident at the Grand Regent grew into a catalyst for systemic change. Weeks later, Kendra returned to the Grand Regent, not as a guest hesitant about her reception, but as a symbol of progress. The staff greeted her warmly, their smiles genuine and their actions a reflection of the new standards Marcus and Kendra had implemented. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed subtle but significant changes. Posters highlighting the hotel's commitment to inclusivity, brochures offering resources on bias training, and a visible sense of accountability woven into every interaction. When she entered the newly refurbished presidential suite, it was as if the space itself had transformed to match the moment. The decor was elegant yet inviting, with thoughtful touches that spoke to an understanding of her worth as a guest. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and gazed out over the city skyline, the glittering lights below mirroring the quiet triumph she felt within. A smile played on her lips as she turned away from the view and sank into the plush armchair by the window. Change, she knew, was often slow, like a ship turning against a strong tide. But tonight, as she sat in the heart of a hotel that had once denied her, it felt tangible, almost within reach. The fight was far from over, but this victory was a testament to what could happen when voices refused to be silenced. For Kendra, the journey wasn't just personal. It was a movement, a statement, a promise that no one else would have to endure what she had. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the evidence of change, she allowed herself to hope for a future where such moments of dignity were not extraordinary but expected.